This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, episode 125.
Welcome to the show created by vets featuring absolutely no pets. This is the Veterinary Project Podcast, hosted by Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht. Our resident veterinarians have swapped out their stethoscopes in favor of microphones to bring you the Veterinary Project Podcast, a show focused on real conversations, aimed to connect this amazing profession full of remarkable people. Through the sharing of collective stories and wisdom, and connecting over the many unique challenges we face, we invite you to join our community of veterinary professionals leading intentional lives. And now, here are the hosts of the Veterinary Project Podcast, Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht.
Hey everyone, welcome back. Another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. It has been a long time since I've led one of these, Jonathan. You've been the man. You've taken charge the last however many.
Let's see how you do.
I almost forgot what to say, but okay, let's get rolling here. This is going to be a fun one. We are diving into all things locuming in the veterinary profession. So if you are a veterinarian who is considering becoming a locum, Jonathan is going to give you some of the sort of pros and cons. I already know we're going to get him ranting. We're going to get him on one of his epic rants. So I'm excited for that. But before we get into that, I do have some serious questions for you, Jonathan.
Yeah, you're digging. You were putting this forward. I was like, all right, we'll see where the questions come in.
Well, okay, so this is where it's coming from, and I'm not trying to cast this on everyone, but this is how I am feeling. Rosalie and I in our household, and it's like things just feel heavy right now. So we're recording this in mid-February. This episode's coming out March 1st. And it's just, everything in the world that's going on, the price of things. Like we ordered, I think for Valentine's Day, we tried to order Cactus Club, but they weren't even taking orders. We went, I think just like Original Joe's, just nothing, just normal food. And it was like almost $200 or something, like outlandish. So my question for you is, are you seeing this? Are you seeing this on the ground with your veterinary clients in veterinary clinics? Like, are they price conscious? Are you starting to see gaps in the booking, or what's happening out there?
Yeah, good question. So we'll keep it to the veterinary space. On the personal front, it's funny because my wife and I, we do seafood every year. Instead of going out, we actually do seafood dinner at home. We've been doing it since I think our first year dating. So it's a long-standing tradition. We had the kids involved this year, albeit to say I spent the least amount on seafood this year because same thing. We're seeing it in the household. Everything you go to buy costs more. So we have consciously, and you and I have talked about it, we consciously spent less this year in order to be able to spread those funds further. And it's just the way of the world. So from a personal standpoint, we're in the exact same boat. And, we're secure, we're comfortable with where we are. And yet still, you got to watch where you spend. On the vet side, you and I have talked about this. In some places, it's regionally specific. In some places, and talking to colleagues and others in the industry, yes, there are where gaps are starting to show up in the schedule a little bit more. Now, is that time of year? Is that the economics? Is that veterinary medicine? Again, it's very dependent. And that's such a political answer, but it is. Because in some places, the majority of our clinics, it's still rocking and rolling. I want to hire more vets. I need to grow. I want to see more happening for our team members. But then you hear mid-US, et cetera, areas where, no, there's true gaps in schedules and you need to start working on your clientele and not just assuming that you're going to bring everybody in day after day after day. So my feeling is, and I'm off to Vegas again to learn more about what's happening in the industry with some key leaders there. There is a little bit of shift happening. Post-COVID is in full swing. Inflation's in full swing. Not recession yet, though.
Yeah. See, and this is what's interesting is everything cycles, everything swings. And I think back, I don't remember what episode it is, but we had Doug Jack on talking about veterinary multiples. And remember, the pendulum was just way over there. And he even said, he's like, it's not going to stay here forever. Right. And then all of a sudden now we look, interest rate environment has totally changed. The economy has totally changed. And that pendulum is swinging.
This is an operator's market. within our own clinics, and I'm speaking on behalf of All Mosaic, and we have spouted this a lot, is amazing opportunity, but we have to do it efficiently. We have to do it with cost savings in mind, and we have to be looking at not only where we can make more money, the revenue drivers, but we need to also be very conscious of cost savings, because interest has definitely bit into everybody's business this year. And as a result of that, the pendulum has already swung.
Okay. Sorry, I'm taking us on tangents.
Let's go.
In your words, operator's market. I want to hear your definition and then I'll chime in.
So in the Canadian market right now in veterinary medicine, there is a reset happening. That means that those that were just purchasing clinics to have more in their portfolio have now had to step back and recognize that those clinics that they bought that were already in the negative are very in the negative now. This is a little bit of a reckoning for the Canadian market in particular, to say you can't just leverage yourself up and then expect all to be hunky-dory. You actually have to operate. Mm-hmm. And that means that in some practices, and the word is out, you're either seeing some job losses, you're seeing cuts, you're seeing cost savings in areas that I have not seen in the vet space in the last 5 years.
Yeah. See, and this is very interesting because you don't hear those words, or you hadn't heard those words around veterinary medicine for so long, right? It was
twice in 2 weeks right now. I have heard of individuals being let go from clinics, and that, like, it just, it boggles your mind, because we're in very much is still veterinary professional shortage. But as a result of what's happened in some areas in our market, the operators have had to make tough choices. And guess what? I'm one of them. This is a year where we want to continue to grow, do really well, expand. There's so many opportunities, but you have to do that consciously.
Yeah. And we're keeping this tight on veterinary business, so I won't go too far here. On the real estate side, it's the same thing. Like when interest rates are super low and everything is just booming, everyone can make money in the business. Everything is going up. Everyone looks like a genius. And now that it's swinging, it's like, no, you got to know your numbers. You got to know how to operate. And then bringing this full circle, if people view their personal houses as little mini businesses, it's the same thing. You got to start looking at what are your costs? Where are they going out? Because honestly, making $100,000 a year nowadays doesn't really, like, talk about a first world problem and a first world rant. But when we graduated, $100,000 was a lot of money.
And it's going to continue to only get worse. Inflation is not done yet. Yeah, as is being proven by the numbers week over week.
So anyway, that was our preamble, which I really wanted to go there because I really feel like an unofficial poll of our listeners, if I had people raising their hand, like, who is feeling it? Everyone I talk to right now, it's the same thing. And like dual income, multiple 100,000 earner couples. Yeah. So household income 200 plus, and they're like, wow, things are tight. So
it really then goes back to what's your savings, what's your spend, what's your debt, all the basics of finance are now coming to bear. And you and I have talked about this offline. We're not actually sure if they've come to bear yet, because there's still a lot of spending happening out there. And you go, how can that continue with what's going on?
No, this is my own personal opinion. And I could easily be wrong on this, but no, it's a lag effect. Like as the interest rates keep rising, and it hasn't worked through the system yet. People are still,
for everybody, these are opinions. This is not financial advice. This is two veterinarians' approach to life.
Yeah. Okay. On with the show. Before we do that, really quick plug, one of our most popular episodes, and something that you seem to be developing a little niche for in the veterinary world, is talking about contracts. So you are going to be at WCVM March 21st and UCVM March 23rd, giving presentations to the students all about contracts. Any teaser for the students there?
No, this is a fun one. This is one I've been able to give around North America. It's fun because I come from an employer perspective, as opposed to many financial advisors out there that are coming from the employee perspective. Here's how you should give it to the man and take him down and negotiate the hell out of him. Well, I like to take the opposite approach and try and see it from both the employee and the employer perspective. What does it mean to be at the table with somebody that actually needs to get a deal done? Because we need more veterinary professionals in the business right now, but also at a way that's still sustainable to the business and not just taking it to the man, because the man has bills to pay as well.
Okay. On that note, I feel like you are primed for a rant. So let's try push you over the edge here and dive into the topic of the day. So focusing in even more specifically on these contracts, if someone was interested in being a veterinary locum. So maybe set the table for us. Where are you going to take us here in the next sort of 20 minutes or so?
We're going to take it from the perspective of, if you are a locum, some of this may or may not apply. There are professional locums, and I'm going to specifically be speaking to veterinarians today. There are RVT locums, also technicians, technologists in the space. Huge respect for them. We use them in multiple practices. Today's conversation is going to be geared towards veterinarians, but a lot of it carries forward to both branches. So take it for what that is. We're going to go through some steps, again, from an employer's perspective, on how we're looking at locums, bringing them in, and just trying to provide some guidance from the employer's perspective when you're coming to me and asking for the world and wanting to set you up for success, because there is a place for veterinary locums for sure, but it's not the be all end all. And so therefore, some simple steps to help make that as best of a synergistic relationship as possible.
Okay, well, let's do it, Jonathan. Let's pretend here. I'm a very keen veterinarian, and I would like to come locum for you. Kick us off. Give me the first thing that I don't know that I should know.
Know your geography. So as an example, Mosaic works in 2 provinces, and the province actually is still wide. Know the region that you're going into and what the going rate is in terms of dollars per hour, expectations, and depending on whether it's small, mixed, large animal, or specialty, what those going rates are. And if you don't know them, it's your job to find out them. In the past 6 months, both myself and colleagues around me have heard some absurd, and I'm going to call it absurd. And I was wondering where I was going to go with today. Who am I going to piss off? Well, I'm going to try probably piss off everybody at some point in this conversation, because the ability for an individual to come in and ask for a rate that is so far out of geography is both a turnoff. It shows some naivety, and or it shows aggressiveness that just it's a complete turnoff, and it's going to burn some bridges long term. Because at some point in future, you may not want to be a locum anymore, an employee, and it's going to stick in the profession. So know your geography, knowing what the rates are, and they can change by the state, by the city, by the community, depending on what's happening.
Okay, how do I find those out?
There's ways. So there's provincial wage guides, there's national wage guides, there's your friends, there's phoning and inquiring at multiple clinics. That's your job. You've decided to be a locum. You need to know that.
Okay, so I'll play devil's advocate here.
Please do, and then I'll come back.
How do we? We all know that there's much more to a role than just the dollar amount, but the dollar amount is important. So you and I are sitting across the table from each other, and we're trying to come up on this magical number. Obviously, I want to get paid as much as I can. You ideally want to pay me, not as much, so that you're more profitable. But we want to meet somewhere.
Yeah.
How do we do that?
We're going to sit down and have a conversation. It's not enough just to slap a text, a phone call, an email, or a contract in front of me and say, "Hey, this is what I'm charging." I want to know, what are you going to do for the practice when you're coming in, no matter the style of practice? What are you able to provide in terms of hours? What are you able to provide in terms of services? In terms of surgery, what can't you do? My assumption as a veterinary locum when you're coming in is, if you don't have it in the contract as an exception to what you're able to provide, then I can schedule you for that surgery, and I can expect it to be done with a competency that equals success for our clientele, the animals you're looking after, and my team that's now trusting that the locum that I brought in is going to be suitable for the practice. Mm-hmm. That's a conversation, and that dictates and that helps work through what that hourly or that per diem day is, or that production rate, depending on how the structures, and all 3 of those structures are possible. A going rule is for small animal, we want to look at a 0.22 as the formula. Take whatever your daily rate is or what your hourly is, times up by 8 if you're working an 8-hour day, times it by 10 if you're working a 10-hour day, and divide it by 0.22. That's the production or the gross revenue that I'm going to want to see if we're working in the normal standards of a long-term locum relationship or even a couple days in order to make it worthwhile. Sometimes the employer does better. Sometimes the employer does less. Right now in this market, there's oftentimes that 0.22 is actually being elevated to 0.23 or 0.24 in the small animal world. In mixed large animal world, that number actually can live anywhere in between 0.19 to 0.21. So as an example, if you are saying, I want to get paid $75 an hour, I'm using this as baseline, not real, or $600 a day, take 600, divide it by 0.22, and you're going to come up with about $2,770. That's the amount of gross revenue I'm going to expect as an employer you can bring into the practice. If you are a brand new grad, don't become a locum right away. You can't meet that expectation, and it's going to fail miserably when you also don't have the confidence because you don't have the experience yet to be able to go through all the pieces our day-to-day practice, surgery, communication, education, the adverse events that happen. That's my expectation as an employer is when you come in, you can do all of that. And if you can't, I need to know it.
Okay. To summarize and sort of to ask if I'm hearing you correctly, and actually a quick question first. In your experience, when locums come to sit down with you, is price the first thing discussed? Do they open? Okay, good. Because what I'm hearing you say is to set up for success, I should be coming to you with basically a list of like, here's all the surgeries that I am very comfortable doing. Like bang, 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 bang. Here are the exceptions. I don't do TPLO.
Don't need a list. My list is the expectation you can do them unless you put exceptions in there. And we have those discussions. Some locums can't do large dog space. That's all right. I need to know that. Some locum doctors can't do foreign bodies. Majority can't do TPLOs. So therefore, if they could do it, then that's going to be an extra they're going to put in their contract. So it's an exception and this is a big one. I don't want a list of the things that you can do. My expectation as a general practitioner, as a locum, is you can do it. Or else why are you a locum? Go become an employee, get the mentorship, get the training, and then decide, through the nuance of career, if you want to become a locum. It's exactly what I did.
Okay. I like it. That straightens it out. Tough question for you that I didn't give you any heads up on. I do see some chatter around the idea of when you're advertising on the clinic level, you should always include like what you're paying. What's your thoughts and where do you stand on that?
So much nuance to it. I will 99% of the time not put that out.
Okay. Just because there's so many factors that go into it. It can't be a blanket statement. That's
a conversation and a negotiation depending on the individual or the clinic.
Okay. Because I have heard, some stuff, and that, again, this is anecdotal. This isn't, I don't know the statistic behind this, but there are people that just will not apply if you do not have a wage offering.
Then they're only going to pick from 1% of the ads out there.
Hey, I'm just throwing stuff at you that I hear.
I'm throwing stuff back.
No, I like it.
You look at the ads, which I look at on a weekly basis, then you've already cut off the best practices possible. Again, it's not about the wage is secondary.
Okay. Nice. Yep. Okay. So keep moving through this. So we talked about kind of your law of 22, and then those numbers can change depending on the practice. Having a contract in place that's spelling out, expectations, working hours, after hours, compensation, all of that stuff. Anything further on that before we dive into more nuance?
Yes, have a contract. So you just mentioned it, but you briefed over it. This is a big one. Have a contract, and the contract could be 2 pages long. But we do have the expectation that, again, and this is something even from a Mosaic standpoint, it's evolved over the last few years as we've utilized more locums in this current veterinary professional shortages. We have to have a discussion and something down on paper that puts both people to account for what that relationship is going to look like. The best way to do so is a contract.
Agreed.
Plain and simple.
Quick question.
Doesn't have to be complicated.
Quick question. I come locum for you. I do a large dog spay and it passes away. liability. Where does this fall as a
Yes.
locum?
So that's where you need to ask the individual clinic whether locums are covered under liability insurance. So for Mosaic, as an example, we do have that coverage. There is gray zone within that coverage, which everybody needs to be aware of. But on the overall, a question to ask. On top of that, I always advocate that individuals carry their own malpractice insurance. We're talking in Canada here. In US, that's a necessity from what I've been hearing. But in Canada, even if you have insurance coverage, and I just worked through this with one of my employees, I still recommend that you have secondary insurance. It's inexpensive, especially if you get it right out of school. It covers you. Even if your employer has it, then there's just secondary coverage in case that worst case scenario ever comes to bear. I barely practice anymore. I still carry liability insurance.
Yeah. I mean, luckily I have no firsthand experience with this, but just what I've heard and been told, if a lawsuit situation ever arises, the lawyers try to grab everyone and anything they can. Yeah. So it's going to be the clinic, it's going to be the individual vet. It's just everyone will be listed. So
that's correct. So again, it's not my advice, it's just my opinion, is have it on hand. Then that question is never going to be a question.
Okay. Perfect.
Excellent. Also on that place, contracts. Know what you're asking for and be ready to discuss it. If you have it in the contract, it means you want it, but it also means we need to chat about it. So if there's limitations on hours, fantastic, put it in there. If there's days or notice period that you want to discuss, put it in there, but then know that we're probably going to chat about it. And if it's a hard and fast and say you can't go around it, great, know that, but be ready to back it up. There's times where I feel passive aggressiveness or the inability to want to engage in challenging conversation. I don't know if this is as a measure of just, putting the piece of paper down and expecting it to be answered. And there's some cases in veterinary medicine right now that's the case. It's not good enough. You're putting yourself out there. We want you to succeed, but you're also representing the clinic when you're in a locum situation. You got to be able to back it up.
Okay. I don't know if this fits here, but I was thinking as you were saying that, like outlining it, I can picture a scenario. Let's pretend I'm the locum and I look at my calendar and it's like, well, I want lots of time off in the summer. And of course I want, all the major holidays off and I want these days off. How does that land if I just come to you and here's my calendar and like, I've got all these dates blacked out and it's like, hey, like take it or leave it. This is when I'm available.
Sometimes it works right now because of the place where we're at in terms of the profession and shortages. And I think I'd be speaking on behalf of many employers. Do we like it? No. Do we have to sometimes abide by it? Yes. Does it also piss off our employees that are working really hard for us and lead to sometimes negative culture? Yes. They also recognize the necessity of needing to cover the clients that are there in the cases. It's a tough spot that we're in right now. Again, the pendulum swings on everything. Or on everything, I should say. And we talk about this as a group that the pendulum on that will swing back as well.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. I guess kind of moving into some of the final pieces here, maybe talk about, what the employer goal of these relationships might be versus and the employee goal, and we can kind of compare and contrast.
Yeah, you really want me to piss people off. Okay, so here's where I'm going to piss people off. Employer goal.
Just to clarify, that's not my goal here, but I do get a chuckle. But to be honest, this is where some of the value comes because we don't do anyone any favors by just sort of saying what everyone wants to hear. Like you got to tell it how it is.
Totally. So the way it is, in my view, is I am always trying to minimize the use of locums. I either don't want you there or I want to turn you into an employee. Plain and simple. A locum is fantastic, but they're a locum by their definition, which means they come in and they fill in and they do an amazing job. We have awesome locums on our team, but they're not fully engaged in the team. They don't join in our monthly calls. They for the most part, don't join in on our continuing education series. They don't join in our after-hour social activities. They're there to do a job and then they leave. And some locums love that. Employer, That doesn't equal great culture. That doesn't equal team inclusion. That doesn't equal myself being able to have the harder conversations with an individual that may be not up to snuff. So if I do so, then again, that's a locum contract. Well, might as well just cancel that locum contract. So in each and every case, when possible, I am going to try and minimize the use of locums, and or if they're amazing, which we just have had a couple here where one has turned into an employee with us, fantastic. Another one we're hoping so as well in the short future here. I want a long-term relationship with them, and a long-term relationship is not a locum contract.
Yeah. Just as you're saying that, I could see, a fit for veterinarians, if they're not sure where they want to land, it's a good way to try it on before, committing.
I did it for 1.5 years. So I'm speaking from first blush here. It's great to be able to go see what different clinics are like, what you like, what's the skill sets that you think you best fit with. But it can be really rewarding, but it can be very lonely because on purpose, you are never fully a part of that team. That's lonely, depending on what your structure and you're looking for is. Yep.
Yeah. And I know we've, not to repeat it too many times, we've had lots of guests that have talked about, that sense of belonging in a veterinary clinic. And how do you put a value on that? And I know we've had other guests that have said they think this is going to come all the way back around where people are going to want to be part of a team,
Yep, that's it. And then that's on the employer as well to make sure that it's a great team, a great culture, a great place with all the tools that are needed to be successful. That's on the employer. So that's still on me. That's on my shoulders. So it's my job to make it so that you want to be, as a locum, turned into an employee. Again, fully my job. Your job to be competent when you come in. And on a little aside, if you have a contract in place and you're invoicing out, then waiting the appropriate time and or putting the metrics in that contract for payment and all those other pieces that come into play. I think we had in our pre-recording notes here, invoicing. It works both ways. So I'll often in the past have gotten emails or texts or very unprofessional comments for payments at certain times. And again, this is working with big corporates or just on my own. Guys, doing that does not do you a service. So wait a couple days and or know that if that corporation and or the independent practice isn't following, then have a conversation. Don't send a text.
Okay. So what is industry standard, right? Like if I was an employee, it's probably every 2 weeks I'm getting my paycheck, depending on how you're set up, maybe bi-monthly. What's industry standard for a locum?
I've seen it speed up actually, which I'm a huge fan of. I do not think that locums should be waiting 60 to 90 days, which is still the norm in some cases with big corporates. And I think that's ridiculous. That's my own personal view because that cash is being used elsewhere. And again, I think that's not right. Nor is paying the next day appropriate. I think there's a good zone there. My own view is in between 14 to 30 days. Again, though, I have multiple locums that are less than that, just based on the individual scenarios and conversations.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, not vet related. I'm thinking of my wife's business, and she deals with some smaller businesses and some huge, like $1 billion international, and they're like net 90 on some of them.
Yep.
So when you think about that, like you've done the work, you invoice, now it's net 90.
Yep.
You're not getting paid for 4 months potentially from when you actually did the work. So really good to have this all spelled out.
And that's now come into the veterinary space. I hadn't seen that until about 2-3 years ago. I think that's ridiculous. I think that's people using other people's money inappropriately. That's my own view, and I get to have it.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Okay. Excellent. Well, anything else we want to get in here?
From a locum perspective, I think the world is your oyster right now. I think that oyster is closing over time. I think our pre-talk today also speaks to it. I have multiple locums on our different teams and clinics that I look forward to working with for the next number of years. And for some of them, I hope they see the opportunity with Mosaic, Bridgeline, etc., and want to become employees.
Mm-hmm. I will let you get the last word. I'm just thinking, I see both sides on this where it's like, I get, the potential for freedom and travel. And like, I get to go all over and see all these different vet clinics and it's on my schedule and my terms. And if I don't like you, I'm just not going to come back. There's a freedom side of it. But when we go all the way back to how we opened this episode, if things start tightening up and clinics have to start making hard choices, if I'm on that locum list, it's probably me that's first to just lose hours and lose shifts and not be called.
It's already happening. Yeah. The word's out. Again, I'm only speaking for Western Canada. The word is out. It's happening already.
Awesome.
Yep.
Okay, Jonathan. Well, close us out here. March 1st, you'll be delivering dynamite contract talks here coming up later on in March. Last word to you.
I'm going back to it. The world is your oyster. There are so many opportunities in veterinary medicine. Locuming is one of them. It is a great profession. Take advantage of it. Do it professionally with respect, and you're going to grow great relationships that are going to lead to long-term success for you and whoever the employer is that you're working with and for at that time. That's it.
Thank you for listening to the Veterinary Project Podcast. As a recap, on behalf of our hosts, the Veterinary Project Podcast will be releasing new episodes weekly, so be sure to tune in as we bring you more conversations aimed at helping you enjoy a life well lived. If you enjoyed what you heard on the show and you want to stay in the know, please like, love, and or subscribe to the podcast on the listening platform of your choosing, as we're available on all the usual suspects. If you know of others that may benefit from these conversations, we'd love it if you please share the show with them, as this will help us grow our community to reach more and more veterinary professionals. Speaking of which, if you are a veterinary professional and would like to get connected with more like-minded individuals who are joining us on this journey, please send an email to the Veterinary Project Podcast at gmail.com, and we'll invite you to be a part of our private Facebook group. General feedback, requests for information, or perhaps requests to be a guest on the show can also be sent to the Veterinary Project Podcast at gmail.com. Dr. Michael Bugg and Dr. Jonathan Leicht, thank you for listening to the show, and we'll catch you again next week for another episode of the Veterinary Project Podcast. Bye for now.